October 28th, 1991. Dear friend, I'm sorry I haven't written to you in a couple weeks, but I have been trying to participate like Bill said. It's strange because sometimes I read a book and I think I am the people in the book. Also, when I write letters, I spend the next 2 days thinking about what I figured out in my letters. I do not know if this is good or bad. Nevertheless, I am trying to participate. Incidentally, the book Bill gave me was Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I know what you're thinking. The cartoon Peter Pan with the Lost Boys. The actual book is so much better than that. It's just about this boy who refuses to grow up, and when Wendy grows up, he feels very betrayed. At least that's what I got out of it. I think Bill gave me the book to teach me a lesson of some kind. The good news is that when I read the book, and because of its fantasy nature, I could not pretend that I was in the book. That way, I could participate and still read. In terms of my participation in things, I am trying to go to social events that they set up in my school. It's too late to join any clubs or anything like that, but I still try to go to the things that I can. Things like the homecoming football game and dance, even if I don't have a date. I cannot imagine that I will ever come home for a homecoming game after I leave here, but it was fun to pretend that I was. I found Patrick and Sam sitting in their normal spot in the bleachers, and I started acting like I hadn't seen them in years, even though I had seen them that afternoon in lunch when I ate an orange and they smoked cigarettes. Patrick, is that you? And Sam, it's been so long. Who's winning? God, college is such a trial. My professor is making me read 27 books this weekend, and my girlfriend needs me to paint signs for her protest rally Tuesday. Let those administrators know we mean business. Dad is busy with his golf swing, and Mom has her hands full with tennis. We must do this again. I would stay, but I have to pick up my sister from her emotional workshop. She's making real progress. Good to see you. And then I walked away. I went down to the concession stand and bought three boxes of nachos and a Diet Coke for Sam. When I returned, I sat down and gave Patrick and Sam the nachos and Sam her Diet Coke. And Sam smiled. The great thing about Sam is that she doesn't think I'm crazy for pretending to do things. Patrick doesn't either, but he was too busy watching the game and screaming at Brad, the quarterback. Sam told me during the game that they were going over to their friend's house later for a party. Then she asked me if I wanted to go, and I said yes because I had never been to a party before. I had seen one at my house, though. My parents went to Ohio to see a very distant cousin get buried or married. I don't remember which. And they left my brother in charge of the house. He was 16 at the time. My brother used the opportunity to throw a big party with beer and everything. I was ordered to stay in my room, which was okay because that's where everyone kept their coats, and it was fun looking through the stuff in the pockets. Every 10 minutes or so, a drunk girl or boy would stumble in my room to see if they could make out there or something. Then they would see me and walk away. That is, except for this one couple. This one couple, whom I was told later were very popular and in love, stumbled into my room and asked if I minded them using it. I told them that my brother and sister said I have to stay here, and they asked if they could use the room anyway, with me still in it. I said I didn't see why not, so they closed the door and started kissing very hard. After a few minutes, the boy's hand went up the girl's shirt, and she started protesting. Come on, Dave. What? The kid's in here. It's okay. And the boy kept working on the girl's shirt. As much as she said no, he kept working on it. After a few minutes, she stopped protesting and he pulled her shirt off, and she had a white bra on with lace. I honestly didn't know what to do by this point. Pretty soon, he took off her bra and started to kiss her breasts. Then he put his hand down her pants and she started moaning. I think they were both very drunk. He reached to take off her pants, but she started crying really hard, so he reached for his own. He pulled his pants and underwear down to his knees. Please, Dave, no. But the boy just talked soft to her about how good she looked and things like that. And she grabbed his penis with her hands and started moving it. I wish I could describe this a little more nicely without using words like penis, but that was the way it was. After a few minutes, the boy pushed the girl's head down and she started to kiss his penis. She was still crying. Finally, she stopped crying because he had put his penis in her mouth, and I don't think you can cry in that position. I had to stop watching at that point because I started to feel sick, but it kept going on and they kept doing other things and she kept saying no. Even when I covered my ears, I could still hear her say that. My sister came in eventually to bring me a bowl of potato chips, and when she found the boy and girl, they stopped. My sister was very embarrassed, but not as embarrassed as the girl. The boy looked kind of smug. He didn't say much. After they left, my sister turned to me. Did they know you were in here? Yes. They asked if they could use the room. Why didn't you stop them? I didn't know what they were doing. You pervert, was the last thing my sister said before she left the room, still carrying the bowl of potato chips. I told Sam and Patrick about this, and they both got very quiet. Sam said she used to go out with Dave for a while before she got into punk music, and Patrick said he heard about that party. I wasn't surprised that he did because it became kind of a legend. At least that's what I've heard when I tell some kids who my older brother is. When the police came, they found my brother asleep on the roof. Nobody knows how he got there. My sister was making out in the laundry room with some senior. She was a freshman at the time. A lot of parents came to the house to pick up their kids, and a lot of girls were crying and throwing up. Most of the boys had run away by this point. My brother got in big trouble, and my sister was given a serious talk by my parents about bad influences. And that was that. The boy named Dave is a senior now. He plays on the football team. He is a wide receiver. I watched the end of the game when Dave caught a touchdown thrown from Brad. It ended up winning the game for our school, and people went crazy in the stands because we won the game. But all I could think about was that party. I thought about it quiet for a long time. Then I looked over to Sam. He raped her, didn't he? She just nodded. I couldn't tell if she was sad or just knew more things than me. We should tell someone, shouldn't we? Sam just shook her head this time. She then explained about all the things you have to go through to prove it, especially in high school, when the boy and girl are popular and still in love. The next day at the homecoming dance, I saw them dancing together, Dave and his girl, and I got really mad. It kind of scared me how mad I got. I thought about walking up to Dave and really hurting him, like maybe I should have really hurt Sean. And I think I would have. But Sam saw me and put her arm around my shoulder like she does. She calmed me down. And I guess I'm glad she did because I think I would have gotten even madder if I started hitting Dave and his girl stopped me because she loved him. I think I would have gotten even madder about that. So I decided to do the next best thing and let the air out of Dave's tires. Sam knew which was his car. There is a feeling that I had Friday night after the homecoming game that I don't know if I will ever be able to describe except to say that it is warm. Sam and Patrick drove me to the party that night, and I sat in the middle of Sam's pickup truck. Sam loves her pickup truck because I think it reminds her of her dad. The feeling I had happened when Sam told Patrick to find a station on the radio, and he kept getting commercials, and a really bad song about love that had the word baby in it, and then more commercials. And he finally found this really amazing song about this boy, and we all got quiet. Sam tapped her hand on the steering wheel. Patrick held his hand outside the car and made air waves, and I just sat between them. After the song finished, I said something. I feel infinite. And Sam and Patrick looked at me like I said the greatest thing they've ever heard. Because the song was that great, and because we all really paid attention to it. 5 minutes of a lifetime were truly spent, and we felt young in a good way. I have since bought the record, and I would tell you what it was, but truthfully, it's not the same unless you're driving to your first real party and you're sitting in the middle of a pickup seat with two nice people when it starts to rain. We got to the house where the party was, and Patrick did this secret knock. It would be hard to describe this knock without sound. The door opened a crack, and this guy with frizzy hair looked out at us. Patrick, known as Patty, known as nothing, Bob. The door opened, and the old friends hugged each other. Then Sam and Bob hugged each other. Then Sam spoke. This is our friend Charlie. And you won't believe it. Bob hugged me. Sam told me as we were hanging up our coats that that Bob was baked like a fucking cake. I really had to quote that one, even though it has a swear. The party was in the basement of this house. The room was quite smoky, and the kids were much older. There were two girls showing each other their tattoos and belly button rings. Seniors, I think. This guy named Fritz was eating a lot of Twinkies. Fritz's girlfriend was talking to him about women's rights, and he kept saying, "I know, baby." Sam and Patrick started smoking cigarettes. Bob went up to the kitchen where he heard the bell ring. When he came back, he brought a can of Milwaukee's best beer for everyone, as well as two new party guests. There was Maggie, who needed to use the bathroom, and there was Brad, the quarterback of the high school football team. No kidding. I do not know why this excited me, but I guess when you see someone in the hallway or on the field or something, it's nice to know that they are a real person. Everyone was very friendly to me and asked me a lot of questions about myself. I guess because I was the youngest and they didn't want me to feel out of place, especially after I said no to having a beer. I once had a beer with my brother when I was 12 and I just didn't like it. It's really that simple for me. Some of the questions I was asked was what grade I was in and what did I want to be when I grew up. I am a freshman and I don't know just yet. I looked around and I saw that Sam and Patrick had left with Brad. That's when Bob started passing around food. Would you like a brownie? Yes, thank you. I was actually quite hungry because normally Sam and Patrick take me to the big boy after the football game, and I guess I was used to it by now. I ate the brownie and it tasted a little weird, but it was still a brownie, so I liked it. But this was not an ordinary brownie. Since you are older, I think you know what kind of brownie this was. After 30 minutes, the room started to slip away from me. I was talking to one of the girls with the belly button ring, and she seemed like she was in a movie. I started blinking a lot and looking around, and the music sounded heavy like water. Sam came down, and when she saw me, she turned to Bob. "What the hell is your problem?" "Come on, Sam. He likes it. Ask him." "How do you feel, Charlie?" "Liked." You see, Bob actually looked a little nervous, which I was told later was paranoia. Sam sat down next to me and held my hand, which felt cool. "Are you saying anything, Charlie?" "Liked." "Does it feel good?" "Uh-huh." "Are you thirsty?" "Uh-huh." "What would you like to drink?" "A milkshake." And everyone in the room except Sam erupted in laughter. "He's stoned." "Are you hungry, Charlie?" "Uh-huh." "What would you like to eat?" "A milkshake." I don't think they would have laughed any harder even if what I said was at all funny. Then Sam took my hand and stood me up on the dizzy floor. "Come on, we'll get you a milkshake." As we were leaving, Sam turned to Bob. "I still think you're an asshole." All Bob did was laugh, and Sam finally laughed too, and I was glad that everyone seemed as happy as they seemed. Sam and I got up to the kitchen and she turned on the light. Wow, it was so bright, I couldn't believe it. It was like when you see a movie in the theater during the day, and when you leave the movie, you can't believe that it's still daylight outside. Sam got some ice cream and some milk and a blender. I asked her where the bathroom was, and she pointed around the corner almost like it was her house. I think she and Patrick spent a lot of time here when Bob was still in high school. When I got out of the bathroom, I heard a noise in the room where we left our coats. I opened the door and I saw Patrick kissing Brad. It was a stolen type of kissing. They heard me in the door and turned around. Patrick spoke first. "Is that you, Charlie?" "Sam's making me a milkshake." "Who's this kid?" Brad looked real nervous and not in the Bob way. "He's a friend of mine. Relax." Patrick then took me out of the room and closed the door. He put his hands on both my shoulders and looked me straight in the eye. "Brad doesn't want people to know." "Why?" "Because he's scared." "Why?" "Because he is." "Wait, are you stoned?" "They said I was downstairs. Sam is making me a milkshake." Patrick tried to keep from laughing. "Listen, Charlie, Brad doesn't want people to know. I need you to promise that you won't tell anyone. This will be our little secret, okay?" "Okay." "Thanks." With that, Patrick turned around and went back into the room. I heard some muffled voices and Brad seemed upset, but I didn't think it was any of my business, so I went back to the kitchen. I have to say, it was the best milkshake I ever had in my life. It was so delicious, it almost scared me. Before we left the party, Sam played me a few of her favorite songs. One was called Blackbird. The other was called MLK. They were both very beautiful. I mentioned the titles because they were as great when I listened to them sober. Another interesting thing happened at that party before we left. Patrick came downstairs. I guess Patrick had left, and Patrick smiled. And Bob started to make fun of him for having a crush on the quarterback, and Patrick smiled more. I don't think I ever saw Patrick smile so much. Then Patrick pointed at me and said something to Bob. He's something, isn't he? Bob nodded his head. Patrick then said something I don't think I'll ever forget. He's a wallflower. And Bob really nodded his head, and the whole room nodded their head, and I started to feel nervous in the Bob way, but Patrick didn't let me get too nervous. He sat down next to me. You see things. You keep quiet about them. And you understand. I didn't know that other people thought things about me. I didn't know that they looked. I was sitting on the floor of a basement of my first real party between Sam and Patrick, and I remembered that Sam introduced me as her friend to Bob, and I remember that Patrick had done the same for Brad, and I started to cry. And nobody in that room looked at me weird for doing it. And then I really started to cry. Bob raised his drink and asked everyone to do the same. To Charlie. And the whole group said, to Charlie. I don't know why they did that, but it was very special to me that they did. Especially Sam. Especially her. I would tell you more about the homecoming dance, but now that I'm thinking about it, me letting the air out of Dave's tires was the best part. I did try to dance like Bill suggested, but I usually like the songs you can't dance to, so I didn't do it too much. Sam looked very pretty in her dress, but I was trying not to notice because I'm trying not to think of her that way. I did notice that Brad and Patrick never talked once during the whole dance because Brad was off dancing with a cheerleader named Nancy, who was his girlfriend. And I did notice that my sister was dancing with the boy she wasn't supposed to, even though a different boy picked her up at the house. After the dance, we left in Sam's pickup. Patrick was driving this time. As we were approaching the Fort Pitt Tunnel, Sam asked Patrick to pull to the side of the road. I didn't know what was going on. Sam then climbed in the back of the pickup, wearing nothing but her dance dress. She told Patrick to drive, and he got that smile on his face. I guess they had done it before. Anyway, Patrick started driving really fast, and just before we got to the tunnel, Sam stood up, and the wind turned her dress into ocean waves. When we hit the tunnel, all the sound got scooped up into a vacuum, and it was replaced by a song on the tape player, a beautiful song called Landslide. When we got out of the tunnel, Sam screamed this really fun scream, and there it was, downtown, lights on buildings and everything that makes you wonder. Sam sat down and started laughing. Patrick started laughing. I started laughing. And in that moment, I swear we were infinite. Love always, Charlie.